Okay, Dale Lewis here with Rescue America Ministries, and the first thing I want to take care of is straighten out, not straighten out this picture. I looked around, I said it looks crooked, but it's not. It's just the angle of the camera, so don't worry about that. The picture is hanging straight. It's just the camera. Now I want to get into something that I'll just be honest with you. I try not to, you know, do a lot of things out of anger, and I have calmed down now. I've had a little time, but this did make me angry. I was reading some in the commentary, a little bit about the law, how this particular person would take on it. For the Christian, the disciples dealt with that issue of what to require of the Gentiles when they became saved, and it was very short and sweet. Just a few things. Don't drink blood. I forget. I don't even remember what they were off the top of my head right now. But just two or three basic things, and that was it. And I've thought for a long time, oh, surely it's more than that. And to be honest with you, you can get more out of those two or three things than just the basic that they're listed as. But nevertheless, didn't say anything about keeping the whole law that the Israelites were given, and the law of Moses. What's happened is that law has been added to. You have what they call the Torah, which was the first 5 books of the Bible, written by Moses, and then where the law was given. And then you have the Talmud, which is difficult to explain a little bit. I used to think it's fairly simple. More studied on it, more complicated it is. It's a library of writings, books that basically, among other things, makes commentary on the Old Testament law, the law of Moses. And what it does is, in many cases, it adds to. In other words, they may say, well, if this is wrong, then this is wrong. But those this, and this may not even be mentioned in the Scripture, but they, on their own, have decided that, well, if this is wrong, then this is wrong also. And so they've added to the law and the Word of God. And, we have that same thing going on today. But we're not, I'm working on a message with that. I'm not going to get into that today. I want to deal with something else. Because this, the commentary kind of upset me a little bit. Let me make it clear, not because the writer, the author did not agree with me, but it's the argument that he gave was so poor. And what it does, he's just repeated the same things that so many others have said, and they just don't add up. They don't make sense. Now, let me go ahead and get this out of the way. I am not saying that this author or any others are stupid, but I'm saying the arguments that they give sometimes are. So let's get into it, and I'll just go ahead and say, because I'll probably blurt it out sometimes getting to this. And again, the issue is not, I don't have an issue with this person, with this author. I still respect him very much. I read after him. I highly value his input. It's just that in this particular case, I think he's absolutely wrong, and he's just parroted what he's heard others and read others, what they've said, and he's just gone along with it. Now, let me go ahead and say, well, this writer and author happens to be Warren Wiersbe. You say, oh, you're going to actually try to correct Warren Wiersbe? No, not him. I'm going to correct the error I see right here, though, or attempt to. No one's perfect, and that includes him, and that includes me, I know also. And, if someone wants to criticize me for what I'm doing here, that's fine. I understand that. Once I become a critic, then I open myself up to be criticized. But again, I want to make clear I'm not criticizing the man. I'm criticizing the reasoning here. Let me just read you right quick. I was reading about the law, and then I went over and I was looking at 1 Timothy chapter 3, where it gives the requirements for a deacon. And I expected something more reasonable from Mr. Wiersbe, but like I said, I was very disappointed. Let me go ahead and, don't want to take too long on this. Let me go ahead and get into it. We'll just, there's 3 or 4 things here that I wanted to point out that just do not make sense. And he goes on to say, talking about the requirements of a pastor and also, a deacon. But specifically talking about a pastor here, makes a statement that, pastor must be the husband of one wife. And he says that it means that a pastor must not be divorced and remarried. Well, it does not say that. I know that's common, that's a common belief, but it does not say that. That's a little bit like the scribes and Pharisees, that added to, they took Talmud and added to the Torah and added their own interpretations of what it would include. And so this kind of adds to what was actually said. It simply says that, the pastor is to be the husband of one wife. Doesn't add anything to it. So man has to figure out what he thinks it means. And most people, seems, at least around where I'm at, come down on the side that, well, you can't be divorced and remarried. But listen to the reasoning. Let's look at the reasoning, how silly some of it is. Paul was certainly not referring to polygamy, since no church member, let alone a pastor, would be accepted if he had more than one wife. Well, I find that kind of hard to believe. This was a society, and I've heard others go even further than that. They said that polygamy was not even practiced during this time. There's no evidence. Listen, don't tell me, as wicked and defiled as these people were, that they didn't anybody practiced polygamy during that day. The Temple of Diana, with all, I forget how many prostitutes they had in that temple. That's common. And that was the way they worshipped Diana. Then just the immorality of that time, and to say that they were moral enough that they wouldn't practice polygamy, I find that very difficult to believe. Now, Dr. Wiersbe didn't actually say that in his writings. He just said that, they wouldn't be in the church. Why not? If a person had 2 wives, and then he got saved, became a Christian, well, who would prevent him from being a part of the church? And I know somebody out there is going to say, well, he'd have to divorce one of those. Wait a minute. And you're probably the same one that says that God doesn't recognize divorce, right? I'm pretty sure. Yeah, pretty sure I've got you figured out. Yeah, it's God does not recognize divorce. So if he divorces the one, if that's the case, then let him in church. He's still got 2 wives because God doesn't recognize divorce. Pick you up another argument somewhere. That one fell through. It just didn't make it. So don't tell me that the polygamy was not practiced, and there may have not been some in the church. In some of the churches, all the churches that had there, with the wickedness and the debauchery of that time period, and in some of those cities, then don't tell me that was just not practiced. Says, nor is he referring to remarriage after the death of the wife, for Why would a pastor be prohibited from marrying again in the light of Genesis 2:18 and 1 Timothy 4:3? Certainly the members of the church who had lost mates could marry again, so why penalize the pastor? Well, I can say the same thing about a man whose wife deserts him. Why penalize that pastor? Why penalize that person? It's a good question. Why? I see no reason to. So if you're talking about, just issue, that's just a weak argument there. And like I said, I'm very disappointed in Warren Wiersbe's evaluation here, his comments. And let's go on. It's clear that a man's ability to manage his own marriage and home indicate ability to oversee a local church, 1 Timothy 3:4-5. A pastor who has been divorced opens himself and the church to criticism from outsiders. Well, let's back up. I went a little further than I meant to. It's clear that a man's ability to manage his own marriage and home indicate ability to oversee a local church. Let me give you a little history on myself. My first wife left me in 1967, and I later remarried. I believe God gave me the woman that I have today, and she's been faithful. She has helped me, and she's been a helper in the ministry that I've done in that meantime. And I've done a lot of things. God's helped me. He's used me, and not in the ways that I could have been if it had not been for all the opposition that I've faced from churches, from pastors who have looked down on me and refused to accept me as a fellow pastor or minister. It's it's been difficult, and it's limited what I've been able to do. But thank God, He called me, and He has allowed me to do some things that I never thought I would be allowed to do, and a lot of other people would have loved to have been a part of. I worked 5.5 years as area director for Prison Fellowship in the western part of North Carolina. Those were great years for me. I appreciate that. And working under Chuck Colson, not directly, but there was some interaction a number of times, and got to know the man a little bit. We were not, buddy. I didn't see him that much, but on different occasions we would over that time period. And so I would be, if I did a fundraising banquet somewhere, there were several times that Chuck came down and spoke, to help us raise funds for our area of the ministry. There's other times, if he was speaking somewhere at another engagement, and my wife and I went to listen, and he found out we were there, and he recognized us, had to stand up and be recognized by the audience, and those were great times. Not that I was out looking for recognition, but hey, it's good to be noted that you're doing God's work. And that's what I've been about. Now, God called me to preach while I was in basic training. And I, unfortunately, not knowing any better, told God, when I get through my 2 years military service, I'll look into that and maybe go to Bible college, whatever, and prepare for the ministry. I did not understand. I was, I guess, spiritually mature enough at the time to understand that. Basically, I told God no. I never intended necessarily that, but that's what it amounted to. Now, what happened after my 2 years was up, I didn't think anything about it anymore. It was gone. And God didn't bother me with it for a few years after that, until He finally started nudging me again. And, talked about Paul being hard to kick into pricks, and that goad that was going, it's not very pleasant. And so finally I gave in and responded to God's call. at first I said, Lord, I can't do this because I'd been taught the same thing these other people have been taught. God doesn't do these things, and I can't be a pastor because I can't preach because, I married a second wife. My first wife left me, divorced me, and so, and argued about back and forth, but he would not leave me alone. And I finally said, okay, something's wrong here. Let me look into this a little better, and I studied it out. Read 2 or 3 books on the subject. Finally threw my hands up because one said this and one said the other. And I said, okay, Lord, I'm just answering your call. I'm going on what you've done and what you're telling me to do. And sure enough, it got me started into the ministry. Now, God has given me the proof, and not only me, but others. I didn't tell anybody about what my decision was, but one night at church, an invitation was given, and it didn't have anything to do with, deciding to preach. But for some reason, the Lord told me, it's time for you to go up before the church and just tell them that I'm calling you to the ministry. And so, as I went up, an older lady, a prayer warrior there in the church, sitting behind my wife and I. At the time, after I'd got up and left for the front, she told my wife, she said, he's been called to preach. Now, I'd been praying that God would show somebody. Of course, my thoughts were the pastor, the deacons, or somebody like that. But no, it was this prayer warrior, this woman, and God showed her. And that, was good comfort to me over the years when I began to doubt at times, knowing that God did answer my prayer that day. And so, trying to hurry on here without going into too much detail on that. At any rate, my wife and I have been married for over 50 years now. So tell me, when Mr. Wiersbe says here it's clear that a man's ability to manage his own marriage and home indicate ability to oversee a local church, tell me how that has anything to do with today, 50 years later. In other words, because someone says that the divorce was because I could not manage my own home. And you make a lot of assumptions there. But just say that was true. What truth does that have for 50 years later that I haven't learned anything? So I'm still, according to this argument, I have no ability to manage a local church. Let me tell you something. There are 2 churches over in Romania today that testify of my ministry. My wife and I went over there I was 70 years old, I think, when we went. 70, 72. I'm 78 now. We were there 3.5 years. There's 2 churches that have started up in gypsy villages over there. One was very effective while we were there, became very well going. Matter of fact, we had the last Sunday there at that one place called Sickendale out in the middle of nowhere outside of Cebu, and a remote village. There were 60 some people in that church our last Sunday there before we came home. Now, the other one was different. It was just remained a small house church the whole time we were there. But someone else came in, and someone that had sit in and been a part of the last few services that we had done at the little home church I had there. And this other fellow, a young man, came in and began to help out some. And so no indication that anybody's going to take it over when we left and come home. I didn't know how that was going to work out. The lady whose house we was meeting in told us so. Before we came home, a few months before that, she said, this place has changed. And it was a wicked place, but it's changed. Now, I got word the other day that this young man who had been at the last few services is now preaching out there. And they had a baptism the other day, and the whole village turned out. They baptized 20 out of another church already, and they were baptizing 4 more that day. And that thrilled my heart. So don't tell me. So that's mine. Just the Apostle Paul said that the church at Ephesus was his confirmation to others, his assurance that it was of God, and assured them of his apostleship. Well, I'm no apostle, but I am a man of God, and I'm called of God, and the churches there in Romania testify on my behalf, just as Ephesus did for Paul. Now, but let's go on. So it has nothing to do, 50 years later, and it still say that, now I understand the saying is true in Scripture that, if a man can't manage his own home, then, how's he going to manage the house of God? Well, and if you're talking about somebody that's, been married 2 or 3 times, and really haven't changed that much, they still have difficulties keeping things going. Yeah, I'd say that person would have difficulty. But in my case and others, it's not just about me, it's so many others in the same situation that are told we can't manage that, because if we couldn't manage we don't fit that category there. Now, let's hurry on though. A pastor who has been divorced opens himself and the church to criticism from outsiders, and it is not likely that people with marital disabilities would consult a man who could not keep his own marriage together. Listen again, that is nonsense. That is like saying the man that stands in the pulpit and preaches the pastor. Is he a sinner? Is he perfect? Oh, no, he's a sinner? Oh, well, he's been forgiven. Yeah, he's been changed. But he's still not perfect. He still commits sin. So why would somebody on the outside come to listen to someone who is a sinner talk to them about their sins? That's the same thing. It's nonsense. In my case, I've had 50 years to change. Even though I wasn't responsible necessarily. I've always said, there's usually 2 in a divorce like that. There's probably some fault on both sides. I'm sure there are in most cases. But who's to be the judge? Now, so that is absolute nonsense, that people on the outside wouldn't want to listen to somebody that's been divorced before to give them advice on divorce. They've been through it. We know what it's like. If you haven't, you don't. You don't know what it's like to have a spouse to walk out on you and then file for divorce. You have no clue. All right, let me hurry on. I see no reason why dedicated Christians who have been divorced and remarried cannot serve in other offices in the church, but they are disqualified from being elders or deacons. Again, I totally disagree. Some, because all it says, and let me tell you another thing. I'll give you a couple more things. The term husband of one wife in the original language actually literally means a one-woman man. Think about that, a one-woman man. I'm going to tell you, a man can be married to one wife and still not be a one-woman man. You understand what I'm saying? And yet they pick out the one that's been divorced and remarried to fit that bill. He's the only one that fits that description. No. A one-woman man. Now I'm going to tell you, look at all these other things, all these other requirements. Let me just read a few of them. He must be vigilant, must be sober, of good behavior, given to hospitality, apt to teach. not given to wine, no striker, not greedy, patient, not a brawler. Let me ask you what all these things have in common. Every single one of them. Every single one of them deal with a man's character at the time that he is a pastor here, or considered for a pastorate. Not a one of them have anything to do with the past. Except if you make this first one to apply to those that have been divorced instead of just those that are not what they should be as a husband, or either maybe they've been divorced multiple times, and yeah, that's a problem then. If it's ongoing, yes, it's a problem. If it's not, then it does, to me, it does not apply, and I don't see it there. And there's some others, many others that are seeing it more and more like that today also. So, I have seen the statistics. I don't know, it's been a few years ago. 600 churches in North Carolina without pastors. Why? Oh, it's not because God didn't call them. It's because churches are set their own standards. They did like the scribes and Pharisees did when Jesus healed a man on the Sabbath day and they tried to accuse Jesus of breaking the law. Jesus said, is it wrong to do good on the Sabbath? He didn't break any laws. He broke their traditions. Because they've added to, and added to what the law said. And so well, this is also wrong, this is also wrong, this is also wrong. You can't do this, can't do that, can't do this. And that's what is happening here when you have a simple statement, the husband of one wife, and then decide, well, that's referring to someone's been divorced and remarried. Now, to prove that God does recognize divorce, yeah, people say you don't recognize divorce. God doesn't recognize divorce. Yes, he does. Well, it's just because of the hardness of the heart. Well, it doesn't matter the reason. The point is, he does recognize divorce. So you lie. You lie. That makes you a liar when you say that God does not recognize divorce. Like the Samaritan woman at the well. How many husbands? Jesus said, go call your husband. What'd she say? I have no husband. And what did Jesus say? He said, you've spoken the truth. Oh, but you've had 7 husbands. Past tense. You've had 7. That is past tense. So if God doesn't recognize divorce, did Jesus lie? No, he did not. She no longer had those husbands. God recognized, Jesus recognized whatever the situation. Well, they all die in their sleep overnight. You know, I don't think so. So, also one more thing, this one I'll close with. The Bible says that he that lays with harlot, when he lays with a harlot, they too become one flesh. You commit adultery with a harlot, then you become one flesh. That is the same term that's used for the marriage situation. It's the very same words. Which means that God recognizes that you have married that woman that you had sex with, and if you've had sex with anyone other than your wife, then God considers it as a marriage. They two shall be one flesh. That's what it says. So, many pastors need to step down or continue in their hypocrisy because they're condemning those that have been divorced and remarried, saying they can't participate, and they're not qualified. And yet you have these others that I've had some pastors, I've heard them talk about the dozens and hundreds of they were truck drivers, and hundreds of women they've had, sex with. And yet they're still pastoring the church. Well, God says, man is joined to a harlot. They two become one flesh. I'll leave it at that. Guilty you are. And a hypocrite if you condemn those who have been divorced and remarried, and yet you continue in your pastor. Dale Little, Rescue America Ministries.